Because of this leaked document, which obviously the government says was out of date, giving out the worst-case scenario of what would happen in a no-deal, so shortages of medicines, food shortages and so on, all these things, isn't it now your responsibility as the Conservative Party to counter that with the most up-to-date and perhaps something that would give us a bit of peace of mind, actually, as a nation, on what would happen in a no-deal?
Well, that document is not a prediction. You, in your question there, you said what will happen. That document is not a set of predictions. It is a set of worst-case scenarios to basically make sure that the government action, which is what we are currently taking, which is why that document is out of date, avoids any of those difficulties. That's what we're working on. But ultimately, as you said in your introduction, what the Prime Minister is really focused on is the future negotiations to get a deal that can get through Parliament, respects the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the traditions of the various communities in Northern Ireland, and enables us to leave the European Union on time, which is what he and we have committed to.
Nonetheless, that document, and some people in Westminster said it wasn't a worst-case scenario, that it was a more realistic assessment of what could or will happen.
It is a worst-case scenario document. That's explicitly what it is.
Even so, people will have read that, and let's go into some specifics. They'll be worried about what was in there. It talks, for example, about a shortage of medicines. So even in a non-worst case scenario, would we be correct as citizens to assume that in the event of a no deal, there will be a shortage of some medicines? And if so, can you tell us specifically what medicines we're going to be short of in the event of a no deal?
So, Richard, you're asking me to go into a whole load of detail on a leaked document, which I am not going to do. And the point I'm making...
Sorry, we're not asking you to comment on Operation Yellowhammer. We're asking you to comment on the document you haven't released.
Yeah, what do you understand to be the realistic position? Yes. What medicines will we be short of in the event of a no deal? That's
so the point I'm making is that is an internal document to stimulate government activity. I am not going to sit here and speculate on a whole load of hypothetical scenarios.
I'm sorry to jump in. I hate interrupting, but Richard, don't you think people have a right to understand that there might be a shortage of medicines, and if so, which medicines?
As I said, Richard, I am not going to go into a whole load of hypothetical situations. The point is, the Prime Minister has made it clear we are seeking to leave with an agreement. And if the EU can be flexible and adaptable on this one issue that we know is a sticking point, it's been rejected by Parliament 3 times, then I think we have a good chance of getting a deal through the House, particularly if those opposition parties are good to your way.
There was this hour-long conversation between the Irish Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, and Boris Johnson. It achieved very little. Ireland wants to keep the backstop in, and therefore the EU will keep the backstop in. Therefore, this deal that you're alluding to won't happen, will it? And so therefore we are looking at a no-deal scenario.
So the EU negotiators always start off by saying no. Every negotiator always starts off by saying no. And through the process of negotiation, people change their position. What we're hoping is that the EU will see the reality of the situation. The backstop has prevented this deal getting through the House of Commons 3 times now, and therefore the Prime Minister is very clear it has to go. And if it goes, and if the EU do show that flexibility, we've got a really good chance of getting a deal through the House, which is absolutely what the Prime Minister and the government wants to achieve. And that is why that letter was sent to President Tusk, outlining the sticking point and outlining a way through it.
Just very quickly, I know you've got to go. I was struck by front of the Times today, the Prime Minister talking about the backstop and saying that the backstop undermines the peace process. I think a lot of people view the backstop and that as being the thing that protects the peace process because it means you wouldn't have a hard border. How does the backstop undermine the peace process in Northern Ireland?
The Prime Minister has made it clear that the UK has no plan to introduce a hard border, and we ask the EU to also commit to not introducing a hard border. The point about the situation with the backstop is that the delicate balance between the communities of different traditions in Northern Ireland is underpinned by their ability to have a voice and have authority. And the concern is that the backstop unbalances that. It runs the risk of unbalancing that because they won't have a voice. Northern Ireland will not have authority over its customs arrangements in the event of the backstop being implemented. That's what the Prime Minister was highlighting. That's the concern that he raised. And he also made the point that this can all become this can be resolved if the EU show a degree of flexibility, embrace the alternative agreement which they put forward as a potential unlock
Boris
for the
Johnson
backstop.
did vote for the deal that included the backstop, which is the irony of the whole situation. But
It was rejected, by the House.
But he voted for it, and he's now our Prime Minister, and now he's asking for something he voted for.
It is true that he voted for something he now says undermines peace. But anyway, James Cleverly, we know you have to go. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. James Cleverly is the chairman of the Conservative Party.